Alrighty, here is your ELA packet, and you'll notice that specifically we're talking about grammar, and the subject of this packet is adjectives that compare. But the first thing I do is always the same. I pick up my pencil and write my name. So why don't you grab your pencil and write your name on your paper? That'd be awesome. I wrote my name, you write your name. Now that we've done that, let's focus a little bit on adjectives, okay? What do adjectives do? Hopefully you remember from the last time you discussed them that adjectives describe nouns, okay? So if I were to take something like a noun, like a dog. So this is a noun, okay? A dog is a noun. Nouns are things. People, places, ideas, okay? That's a noun. If I were to describe that dog, maybe I describe its color and I say it is a brown dog. Well, brown would be an adjective. Or if I said it's a happy dog, that's an adjective. Maybe it's a fast dog. Maybe it is a furry dog. Maybe it's an American dog. So if I'm using a word to describe a noun, all of these would be considered adjectives because they describe dog. So remember that as we go through here. It's really important to know that adjectives describe nouns. Why is that important? Because we're going to talk about a specific kind of adjective today. And that says, I'll get my highlighter out, it says descriptive adjective. And what is a descriptive adjective? It says an adjective that compares is a descriptive adjective. You can use adjectives to compare two or more nouns. How do you do that? Well, here's a clue. It says add ER to an adjective to compare two nouns. And here's an example. The Arctic is colder than the tropics. So there are two nouns in that sentence. So I have tropics, that's a noun. And I have the Arctic, that's a noun. And I'm comparing the two. And I'm saying that the Arctic is colder than the tropics. So putting that ER on the end makes it a descriptive adjective. Now, you can go even further. It says adding EST to an adjective. If you do that, you use it to compare more than two nouns. So like if you said winter is the coldest of all four seasons. Well, now I'm comparing way more than just two because I do have winter, that's a noun, but then it says all four seasons here, right? And we know that that includes summer, winter, spring, and fall. And by using that EST, I'm taking my adjective cold and I'm making it descriptive. I'm comparing more than two nouns. So yeah, I could say that winter is cold, but if I'm comparing winter to all the seasons, I would say winter is the coldest of all the four seasons. Okay, so ER and EST. Okay, now that we've had a little mini lesson on it, let's go down to section A and take a look. It says circle the correct adjective. I'm just going to circle adjectives so I can remember what to do for each sentence. I'm either going to say this pumpkin is bigger than the one I grew last year, or this pumpkin is biggest than the one I grew last year. We're going to use ER if there's two nouns, or EST if there's more than two. So I have one pumpkin here. This pumpkin is blank than the one I grew last year. So if I were to ask you how many nouns do I have, I've got one pumpkin, and then I'm talking about the one pumpkin I grew last year. That would be two. Sorry that my phone went off. That was loud. So if I have a two, the rule says, then I'm going to use ER. So I have to say this pumpkin is bigger than the one I grew last year. I would only use biggest if I was comparing more than two things, okay? Let's take a look at number 2. Mercury is the blank of all the planets. So Mercury is one of my nouns that I'm comparing. What am I comparing it to? All the planets. And there's 9 of them, aren't there? Unless you count Pluto, then there's 8, right? So if that's true, then there's definitely more than 2 nouns. So what am I going to do? I either have to do ER or EST. And according to this sheet, ER is for 2, and EST is for more than 2. So I'm going to say 3 plus. So we're going to have to say smallest. Mercury is the smallest of all the planets. Okay? I'm going to take you through these next ones pretty quickly, just from a counting perspective, and I hope that this makes sense to you. This is the blank orange I've ever eaten. So our noun is orange, but are we comparing 2 oranges or more than 2 oranges? This is the blank orange I've ever eaten. So that, to me, that sounds like lots of oranges, okay? But I'm going to let you answer that one on your own. Number 4, that clap of thunder was even blank than the last one. So I have my clap of thunder. Then I'm comparing it to the last one. That sounds like 2 nouns, okay? The yellow kitten is blank than the striped one. So I have 1 kitten that I'm comparing to the striped kitten. So that's 2 kittens. On number 6, of all the rabbits, the gray one was blank. Now this one is tricky because if you try to say the answer, it's not going to make sense because both of them sound good. Of all the rabbits, the gray one was quicker. Of all the rabbits, the gray one was quickest. They both sound good, but only one of them is really correct because I have rabbits, which would mean a lot of rabbits, and I'm comparing one of them to all of them. So that's more than 2, okay? On the next one, it says, a river is usually much blank than a creek. What 2 nouns am I comparing? A river and a creek. Those are my nouns. Okay? Pause this video, make sure you've got all of them answered, and then unpause it to move on. By the way, if we get to a spot that I'm moving too quickly, feel free to pause this at any point in time, okay? What are our instructions on part B? Read the paragraph from A Flight to Lunar City, circle the adjective that compares in the underlined sentence. So I'm looking at the underlined sentence to circle the adjective, okay? Let's read. Now they were almost there. I guess I could zoom in a little bit, make it a little easier for you to see. Now they were almost there. Robbie wriggled and squirmed. Settle down, Maria scolded. Sometimes Robbie was awfully wild, like a real puppy. Now here we go. This is where this descriptive adjective is. Maria was thinking about adjusting his personality profile program to make him a little calmer. So in there is as a descriptive adjective, and we know that we're probably looking for something that ends in ER or EST, right? Because that's what we just did above. So in that sentence, as I go through there, Maria was thinking about adjusting his personality profile program to make him a little calmer. I only actually see one word that ends in ER or EST, and that would be calmer. Do we think calm is an adjective? Well, Robbie is a noun, because that's a person. Could I say that Robbie is calm? Yes, I can. So that means calm is an adjective, and calmer would be my descriptive adjective. So that works for me if it works for you. Let's move on to the next page. Here we're going to be talking about spelling quite a bit. And there's some, I won't say trickiness to it, but just some things you have to pay attention to. It says some adjectives change their spelling when ER or EST is added. Here's your rule. When an adjective ends in a consonant and Y, change the Y to I and add ER or EST. So if you have the word happy as your adjective, you could say happier, change the Y to an I and add ER. Or if you're going to say happiest, change the Y to I and then put EST on the end. The same thing happens with cozy. If I want to say cozier, change the Y to an I and then put ER on it. Change the Y to I to put EST on it for coziest. That's a good rule. Now here's your next one. When an adjective ends in E, drop the E and add ER or EST. Okay? So, for instance, if I'm looking at the word pale, and I can zoom in on this just so this is easy to see. And I want to make pale become paler or palest. What do the rules say? Get rid of that E and then put an ER in the end, or get rid of the E and put the EST on the end. Okay, that's if it ends in E. Same thing for here, like if I have the word large. So I'm going to get rid of that E on the end and put an ER on. Or if I want largest, get rid of that E, put the EST on. Good rules to know, because that's going to change your spelling, because what would happen? Pale would look like this, P-A-L-E-E-R, but that doesn't look like paler to me, right? So you want to remember that rule, please. Okay, last one. Here we go. When adjectives, have a short vowel sound before a final consonant, okay, I'm going to do short vowel. I'm going to underline that. Double the final consonant, and then you're going to add the ER or the EST. So if I'm looking at the word sad, okay, and sad definitely is a short vowel sound because it's not said, it's sad, okay? That is my short vowel sound, so you have to double the last letter and then put your ER or EST on the end. So you'll notice you double that letter, then put your ER on. Double that letter, put your EST on the end, okay? Same for thin. I in thin is a short I sound. It's not thine, right? It's thin. So the rule says double the last letter and then put your ending on. So there's your double your N, put ER on, double your N, put EST on. Boom, done. Those are your 3 rules that are going to help you with spelling some of these tricky, I don't know if tricky is the right word, but we'll say tricky spellings. Okay, here we go. Now that we know that, let's use our rules here. So I have big, we're going to add ER to it. It ends in a consonant. Maybe I should zoom in. Is that pretty far away? Let me get a little closer. There we go. It ends in a consonant. It has a short vowel, I. So what is the rule? You have to double that last letter and then put your ER on the end. So there's your big, double the last letter, and then put your ER on it. Okay? This ends in a Y, sunny. So if I'm going to say sunnier, I'm going to change the Y to an I and then put my ER on the end. Silly also ends in a Y. So if I use the rule, I'm going to change the Y to an I and add ER. Number 4 ends with an E. If you remember the second rule, you have to get rid of that E and then put your ending on. Nicer. And then bluer, oh gosh, we don't use that very often, but it ends in an E. B-L-U, get rid of that E, and put your ER on the end. Okay? On these next 5, we're going to put EST on the end, but I'm going to, rather than tell you the answers like I did with the first 5, I'm going to help you understand the spelling patterns, okay? 6 and 9 both end with a Y. So I'm going to just tell you now that your rule is going to be get rid of the Y and then add your EST. If you want to pause the video and do that now, you may. Number 7 ends with an E, so your rule is to get rid of the E and then put your EST on the end. On 8 and 9, ends in a consonant, has a short vowel before it, so a, fat, red. And the rule is, if you remember, you're going to double the last letter and then put your EST on the end. So go ahead and pause this video and finish those last 5, please. When you're done, you can move on to B. Make sure you're using your nicest handwriting, please. Okay, descriptive adjectives. They give us the adjective, but we have to change it. It's either hottest or hotter, faster, fastest, bigger, biggest, shorter, shortest, rainier, rainiest. So we have to spell it right, and we have to use the correct one. So if I was going to do this first one, yesterday was the blank day all summer. So we're comparing one day to all the days in the summer. So that's more than one, or excuse me, more than 2. So that's going to be hottest. And there's a short vowel in hot, so the rule is to double that last letter. So I take that word, double the last letter, and then put EST on. I'm not using hotter because I'm comparing more than 2. Okay? I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'm going to help you get started with the next 3. Shane was blank than Tom. I have Shane. I have Tom. Those are my 2 nouns. If I'm comparing 2, then I'm going to be using ER. Okay? Fast becomes faster, and I don't have to know any special rules for this one, so I'm just going to write faster. Okay? I'm going to help you with these next 3, but I'm not going to tell you how to spell, I'm not going to tell you the answer. But on number 13, this coat is blank than my old coat. How many things are we comparing? One coat to another coat. There's 2 things. So you're going to want to use ER for this one. And here we have a short vowel before a final consonant. So the rule is to double that last letter before you write your ER. Okay? Number 14, by the way, pause this video anytime you're going to write so that you don't have to listen to me talk while you're writing. 14, tomorrow will be the blank day of the year. So I've got one day compared to all of the days of the year. So that's more than 2 nouns, okay? And I'm going to let you figure that one out on your own. Pause this video and write your answer. On number 15, it says, it is blank today than it was yesterday. So it either is going to be rainier or rainiest, okay? How many am I comparing? So I'm comparing today to yesterday, so that's 2. The other thing you have to remember is this ends in a Y, and the rule is to get rid of the Y and put an I in its place, and then put your ending on. And I'm going to let you finish that one on your own. As usual, there are some tricky words we need to know about. On this page, it says some adjectives that compare do not add ER or EST. For example, the comparative form of good is better, and the superlative form is best. Now, those are fancy words that basically mean good would be comparing, we'll say 2 things, and superlative would be my more than two things, right? Like, he is the best speller in the class, versus maybe saying he is a better speller than his sister, something like that, okay? So the comparative form of bad is worse, and the superlative form is worst with a T on the end. And once again, if I'm comparing two things, I'm going to use worse. If I'm doing more than two, it'd be worst. So, and many is an adjective, this word many right here. That is an adjective that refers to more than one thing. More compares two things. Most compares more than two. Right? So if I were to say, like, he has many Pokemon cards, that's an adjective. He has more Pokemon cards than his friend. That's two. He has the most Pokemon cards in his class. That's more than two, okay? Here we're going to circle the one that works, the word that is correct in these sentences. So I like corn better or best than green beans. Corn versus green beans, that's two. I have to use better. Our city has blank sunny days than rainy ones. So I'm comparing sunny days and rainy days. So that's two, right? So do we say more or most? Well, more is for two. Most is for more than two. I'm going to use more. Our city has more sunny days than rainy ones. That was the blank movie I've ever seen. So we're talking about movies, but then it says, out of all that I've ever seen. So that's more than two movies, right? So I have to decide whether I'm going to use this one or this one. Has to be worst. I think the Eagles are the blank team in the country. So that means I'm comparing the Eagles team to all the teams. So I need to decide, is that two or is that more than two? It's more than two. So I'm going to say the Eagles are the best team in the country. Okay? I'm going to let you do the remainder of these on your own, but I'll read them and point some things out. I did blank on the last test than this one. So I'm comparing this test to a different test. So that's two nouns. Pause this video if you need to. My cold is blank today than it was yesterday. So I'm comparing today's cold to yesterday's cold. That's two things. Of all my friends, Maria has the blank video games. That's it. And there's your key words in here. Of all my friends. Okay, so you have to decide, is that two or is that more than two? I think Mrs. Casa is the blank teacher in the world. There are lots of teachers in the world. So that should help you decide whether it's better for two nouns or best for more than two nouns. We had blank snow days this year than last year. So I'm comparing the snow days we had this year to snow days we had last year. And this might be a tricky one because this says snow days. Okay? But we're talking about snow days in a year. And then we're talking about snow days in a different year. So we're comparing two things, even though it looks like we're talking about lots of different things. I just played my blank game ever. Ever. That means if you're playing video games or whatever game this might be talking about, are we talking about just two games or are we talking about more than two games? And I'll let you decide that one on your own.